Hi everybody, welcome to Glow with Grace. I am really excited today to be sharing an interview with you with my dear friend Katrina all the way from BC, Canada. Hi Katrina.
Hi everyone.
Thank you so much for being here. This has been a long time in the making, trying to get to do this interview, and I'm so happy that we're getting to do it today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk with you.
So there's a couple of main topics that I want to go over with you.
Okay.
One is unassisted birth. That's kind of the topic of these videos. But the other one is that you've been tandem nursing, and I'm really interested in that. I just cannot even get my head around the logistics of how you tandem nurse. And you've done it, you're doing it, so I want to know about that. So before we go into all of that, you have two beautiful children. Sophia is 4 and a bit.
Yeah, she just turned 4 in June.
And Alexander, wow, in a couple of days, right? He's going to be 1.
Yeah, his birthday is on Sunday. He's turning 1. It's been a whole year.
Wow. And so you've had 2 beautiful home births. The first with a midwife.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the second here in Ecuador, unassisted.
Yes.
So we're going to go.
Alexander is a little Ecuadorian.
We have Ecuadorian children. I never imagined I would have an Ecuadorian child.
Yeah, well, it stands out much more once you leave Ecuador.
Okay.
You know, to tell people it's always a big point of conversation since I've come home that my son is Ecuadorian. Because women love asking birth stories and asking how my births were, and I'll tell them that he was born in Ecuador, and they say, "Oh, does that mean he's an Ecuadorian?" I say, "Yes, he is." He has an Ecuadorian passport and everything, and he has a Canadian one now as well, but because his father is from the US, he'll be able to have a US passport too. So very lucky little man having access.
Okay, so let's go back to Sophia's pregnancy and birth, your first child. How was that whole picture, the pregnancy and the birth with Sophia?
Beautiful. It's really interesting to have the new perspective that I have on it now, having had a second child. The first time is just so first time. You're so overwhelmed. Everything is new. I'll never forget the first time I noticed I was producing colostrum. It was just unbelievable. It was like, wow, this body is here to reproduce. It's not really my own. And just this whole experience of feeling that my body was no longer my own in the same way that it had ever been, that it was in service to actually bringing new life to the planet and giving birth to the next generation. And that was really cool. So the pregnancy with Sophia was really smooth. I had no complications with that pregnancy. I'd just come out of a really long juice feast when I got pregnant. We actually juice feasted in preparation for pregnancy, and it's been really interesting to me because I was a lot less, I felt a lot less grounded in a way during that first pregnancy. And I think that, the juice feast, as you probably know, I don't know if your experience was the same, but for me, my experience of juice feasting was that it was very spiritual. It was very unearthly in a way. And pregnancy, I wanted to be really rooted and grounded. And so they felt like it took a while for me to get out of that mode of juice feasting and this feeling of lightness and freedom in my body and not eating very much to this feeling of, whoa, like here I am, I'm growing, I'm like getting bigger and bigger, and I'm feeding this new life, and I have to feed myself as well. And so I actually transitioned out of a raw vegan diet during that pregnancy because that was what felt right to me, and that was what called me. And so her pregnancy was really beautiful, and I was really interested in unassisted birth for her birth as well. I had several books on the topic. I had numerous women in my lives who had done unassisted birth, and I felt really drawn to the idea. And so when I went into labor with Sophia, I chose not to call it the midwife. David and I had talked about not calling the midwife and just letting it flow and see what happened. And I guess about I mean, my labors were always really interesting because I had very, very strong Braxton Hicks for weeks before going into labor.
Wow.
So my uterus, I've got a really powerful uterus. I always felt like it was really working up to it. And so with both labors, I went into labor and was never really sure. I was like, okay, I've been feeling like this for weeks now. I'm not sure if this is the real thing yet. And it was the same for Sophia. So I actually labored all day, really gentle labor. I went on nice long hikes. I beat David in a game of Scrabble. It was Father's Day, so we had a really nice Father's Day dinner. And then it was like around 10:30, I was like, okay, I'm really in labor. But we didn't call the midwife until about midnight. And at midnight I called her because I started feeling really, really stuck. And I felt like, okay, I need some help. I need a woman who knows what's happening. And I started to feel scared because the contractions were very, very strong. And I experienced a lot of pain. And so we called Maggie, and she came, and she actually told me that my cervix had not tipped forward, which it needs to do before the baby is able to come back. Like during our normal lives, our cervix points backwards, like it's tipped backwards in our body, and then it needs to actually tip forward to line up with your opening so the baby can come out. And so she gave me a different position to labor in and told me that I had 24 to 48 hours left to labor.
Wow.
And then she left because she was attending another birth in a hospital. It was a very busy summer for her. And I went into quite an intense state of fear at that point. And I don't think that I would have had my midwife stayed, but because she had to leave and go to a different birth, I had never done it before. I wasn't aware of what was happening. And I had it in my mind that it was going to take 24 to 48 hours. And within 2 hours, no, was it 2 hours? No, I think I've got my timing off. You know what? I didn't call Maggie till like 3:30 in the morning. So David and I actually labored alone pretty much all night. So it was about 3:30 in the morning I called her, and then she left again. And then an hour later, which would have been like at 4:30, we called her back to say that I was pushing. And because she had told me I had 24 to 48 hours left, I was thinking that I wasn't ready to push and that this baby was going to break me wide open.
Oh, no.
So I had a very beautiful, powerful birth, but I experienced a lot of fear during it. That took me quite some time to incorporate. And I think that's a fairly common experience from women that I've spoken to, is having an expectation of what birth will be like, and the reality is very, very different. And that was definitely the case for me. And it was really important for me because I think it was a really important, humbling experience to have that experience.
Right.
And to have the process of having had really high expectations, because I was watching all of the orgasmic birth movies, and my vision was that I was going to go out under a tree and just gently slide this baby out, and it was like totally the opposite for me. I felt like I was riding a bucking bronco that was going to actually take my life, was my experience of it.
Wow.
But anyway, once the midwife came back and she told me everything was fine, I was taken out of that place of fear again, and it was like, okay, the baby's coming, I'm okay. And I pushed her out. It took about half an hour for her to come out, for the pushing to actually happen, and she was born. And my midwife said that was the fastest turnaround she'd ever seen on a cervix tipping forward. And there was Sophia. Really healthy, really beautiful. She was 7 pounds, 12 ounces.
Wow.
And, that was her birth.
Beautiful, and she's such a wonderful little gal. And now
yeah,
she has
it's amazing. She is. Yeah, and that birth, my mum was actually there as well, and David was right there. David caught Sophia. She came out.
Aww.
The midwife was amazing. I really love my midwife here on Salt Spring. She was very, very respectful. She left the room as soon as she saw that, we had everything happening, and was able to just give us time alone as a family, which was really lovely. And
and you didn't involve water, right? Or did you labored for a while in water? Or?
No, I didn't. My births were so intense that I never felt like I could even get into water. Like with Sophia's birth, I was literally on all fours on the rock floor in the bathroom. We had a slate floor, and I felt like I could not move. I couldn't get off. It was like so strong. I felt like I just had to. It was this experience of like needing to hold onto a rock in the middle of like a raging storm.
Wow.
And that was what I was doing.
Wow.
I was sitting there, and so my experience of the birth was actually that it was such a powerful, overwhelming water experience that I wanted to be on rock. I didn't want to be in water.
Right.
I had a pool ready, and I was, you know, in my mind that was what I wanted to do, but my physical experience of it was very different. And
right.
Water was not what was right for me in either of my births. And actually after that first birth, I didn't even consider a water birth.
Wow.
It's like, no, I think I want to be on like a granite hilltop with nothing else. I want to be like chained to that granite hilltop and have something really solid to hold on to.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward 3 and a bit years.
Yeah.
And you're pregnant again with Alexander. How was that? How was that pregnancy?
It was really, really amazing. I felt a lot more grounded during that pregnancy, and I think part of that was actually having a really busy 3-year-old. She wasn't actually 3 for most of that pregnancy. She was 2.5 when I got pregnant. Okay. So just, you know, having to stay present to a 2.5-year-old person, I was kept very focused and grounded and, you know, in the moment and happy, which are all really important things to be when you're pregnant. And in the dirt with her and doing very child-centric projects all the time with Sophia. So it was good. It was also a much more challenging pregnancy on the exterior, though, because I was in Ecuador and I was very far away from family, and I actually found out during that pregnancy that I had parasites, which is a very common thing in Ecuador, which I didn't realize until mid-pregnancy, and my husband got really sick, and so we all went and got tested, and I discovered that I had a kind that eats through your intestines and goes after your liver and your brain, like really scary, and it also crosses the placenta into your baby. Oh, wow. And so there was that. I mean, there was numerous other things that were going on for me that would have made that pregnancy much more difficult, and yet it was a much more easy pregnancy. And so I felt that was a real testament to our ability to grow. You know, like it was something that I was experienced in already, and so it was just a lot easier. Another little story I'd love to share actually about growing and how amazing people are is I remember when I heard that you were moving to Ecuador and that you were living there, and that I knew that you wanted to have babies. I knew that you really wanted to become a mother. And I remember thinking, oh, well, she'll surely come back to the States to give birth. Or she must be planning on going back to the UK or to the US. I just couldn't imagine giving birth in Ecuador. You know, I'd lived in Guatemala, and I'd done quite a bit of traveling in Peru, and I was very familiar with South America and Central America, and I knew that, of course, women give birth there every day, but just the idea of you or of me giving birth there just didn't seem like a possibility. And so I went from that mindset to actually giving birth to my son alone in Ecuador, an hour away from a hospital, in a house with no running water at the time he was born. And it was just, I realized that one day, and I was like, wow, we really are flexible beings. And I almost couldn't remember having felt that way. Right. I think I read it in a journal or something. I was like, really? I used to think Angela couldn't give birth in Ecuador? Anyway.
That's so funny.
I thought that was fun.
That is funny. All right, so Alexander's birth happened almost exactly a year ago. And did you choose for that to be unassisted, or that was kind of how it turned out, or how did that go?
Well, again, I was very interested in unassisted birth. as I had been with the first, and felt like I still felt really drawn to creating that for myself. And I had a lot of women around me who were doing an assisted birth, yourself included, that were an incredible amount of strength, provided an incredible amount of strength and inspiration for me. My friend Ingrid Bauer actually was the first one who I ever heard of, and she free birthed 3 of her children by herself. And then there was you, and of course our mutual friend Jessica did it there in Ecuador. I have several friends online in the interwebs who have done it, who are an amazing source of inspiration. Courtney Clay and a friend named Sky, who actually lives in Australia as well, who all, you know, they just had their babies by themselves. And it's one of those really good examples of the more people who are doing it, the easier it becomes for more people to do it. It doesn't seem as foreign or as scary anymore, and it seems more like a possibility. So I was really drawn to it just as a source of, I don't know how this will sound, but for me it felt like a really amazing act of taking birth back, because I know so many women who have had their births taken away from them and felt completely disempowered. I have 2 very close friends who had the experience of losing full-term babies in the hospital, and they feel like that was a result of negligence on the part of the doctors. And very, you know, it's an incredibly heartbreaking story and thing to live through, but when you come in touch with it personally, you realize, I mean, it's not a rare thing for that to happen. And so the idea that hospital births are, you know, the safest, best, you know, cleanest way to do it becomes, once you start looking at it, it becomes apparent that hospitals are very important for certain things, and they've really helped us improve our quality of life in certain ways. I'm not someone who is totally against Western medicine for all, you know, blanket statement against it, but in certain cases it's not needed, and I think it's far overstepped its reach, Western medicine. And the case of birth is a really good example, because birth happens naturally when women are empowered to do it. And I think the statistic is something like 95%. I don't know if you remember ever reading that statistic, but it's like 95% of births happen without complications if they're left alone and if the woman feels secure and supported to do her birth. So for me, it felt like something really valuable that I could do, not just for myself, but for birth, you know, for the common collective experience of birth. And we're all doing that. I mean, anyone who does it just adds their little drop to the bucket in that way. And so I really prepared myself for that birth a lot deeper than I had for my first. I did a lot more work on beliefs, and you lent me Laura Shanley's Unassisted Birth, which made a huge difference to me. I love that book. That book is incredible. So thank you for sharing that with me. And she really inspired me to start doing work on beliefs. Which I did. I've actually got journals full of beliefs that I was working with. And what was really cool was that once I started to work on my beliefs around birth, all beliefs started to get questioned. And I actually found it was an experience really similar to any sort of major undertaking you take, where you start changing one little thing and then everything just starts getting better. You know, the juice feast is similar when you do something like that. You sort of say, okay, I'm taking control of this part of my life, and then it magically affects all other parts of your life. Like my relationship with David got better, my relationship with my daughter, my relationship even with my dad went through massive healing during that time, just because I was really closely investigating, okay, what do I believe? It's a really cool thing to do.
Oh, beautiful.
So I was doing that, and I also was working with a midwife. I actually started working with a midwife when I discovered that I had parasites, because I was prescribed very strong antibiotic that actually causes birth defects in the first trimester. And I was thinking, if that's the case, I don't want to take it at any time. And I wasn't interested in taking antibiotics anyway. So I worked with a midwife. Anyway, long rambling story. Your question was, had I intended to do an assisted birth? I've been rambling on and on. Yes, the answer is yes. I was still also very open to supporting myself in case I felt the need for a midwife again, the same way that I had with the first birth. And so I did work with a midwife there. She was from Argentina. Really lovely woman, and yet not someone that I ever felt like I wanted at my birth. She was a very fiery, classic Argentinian person. And so she really helped me get over, like, to work with the parasite issue that I had. And I also went, I went into Loja and discovered where the hospital was. And then it didn't become crystal clear to me that I was going to do it by myself until the very night he was born. And I had been trying to arrange a meeting between the woman that I was working with as a midwife and the woman who I was interested in having there as a doula. Because I really wanted someone who was fluent in Spanish to be there, because my Spanish is very spotty and the midwife didn't speak any English. And so I was like, hey, I don't want to be translating while I'm in labor. And so the midwife never showed up, which was something she had done before.
Wow.
And I realized this isn't the kind of energy I want brought to my birth. I want someone who is early to come to this meeting. And so it just became really, really clear that I didn't want her to come. And so I told my baby, I said, okay, that midwife is no longer coming to your birth. But tomorrow I may go out and find a new one. So if you want to come when it's just me and your dad, you should come tonight. And that night I went into labor.
Wow.
And because I had had that conversation with my child, I just knew it was like, hey, this is it. He wants to come when it's just myself and David. I'm doing it. And absolutely every last question or doubt or fear that I had was gone, and it was incredible. It was one of those moments where everything just falls into place. It was really, really powerful for me, that birth.
That's beautiful.
So yeah, I think I did intend it, but I had some stuff to wade through. I had things to wade through and sort of throw away and get rid of and move out of the way. Felt like there was a lot of clearing that had to be done, including the fear of birth that I experienced with the birth of my daughter. I really worked on clearing that as well.
Wow. Did that feel like it was totally dealt with by the time he arrived?
Yes. Yeah, and I actually worked with a dear friend of mine there in Ecuador as well, Jan Wallace, on that.
Nice.
She really helped me. She works with the subconscious, and she really did some deep work with me on clearing that.
So did you do any kind of medical check stuff during your pregnancy?
Other than with the midwife, no. And that was actually another reason that it became really clear to me that I didn't want to work with this midwife, because she was very adamant about wanting me to do checks. She wanted me to go get vaginal exams, and she wanted me to have I don't even remember what it's called. Ultrasound. Yeah. And she wanted me to have an ultrasound. I didn't do ultrasound with either of my children. And I didn't want, and blood testing. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff she wanted me to have done, and I just didn't feel, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to go into an Ecuadorian hospital, which is very 1950s still. There's a lot of, like, the doctor that I went to meet in Loja, he was very clear that we all needed to be eating red meat. He was like, you have to eat red meat. So their beliefs are very different than the doctors and midwives that I worked with here in Canada. And I didn't feel interested. I knew I didn't need them. I had all the testing for Sophia. I'd had the blood tests done for Sophia when I was pregnant with her. I knew that my blood was great. So it felt like an informed decision for sure for me to know that I didn't need to go and do it. And that was something that was very difficult for her. So that was just another sign that she wasn't the woman that I wanted to work with.
So where did you end up giving birth, and was Alexander in the kind of optimal birthing position, or was he, breech or whatever?
Yeah, I ended up giving birth at home in our little house on the hill, and he was in the right position. And I actually went, because the midwife seemed very unsure, because the 3 times that I met with her, she would feel for him, and she said, yes, I think his head is down, but not totally sure. And I ended up going to see the midwife that you went to visit, who helped to turn Uriah when Uriah was breech. And I was partly curious to meet with a male Ecuadorian midwife, just to see what that experience would be like. And I was also very interested in hearing that the baby was head down. And so I did go meet with him, and he assured me that the baby was head down. And that was an interesting experience. Very, very sweet little man. And he did his checkup in the bedroom where he and his wife slept. And yeah, the whole experience was really beautiful, getting to experience what it's like for women in another country as well.
And he's like 85 years old, right?
Yeah, very sweet. Really, really rough.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
Yeah, compared to the women who were also caring for me. Yeah, and my Argentinian wife lived in a really beautiful little bamboo hut with her mother and father and her 2 children and her boyfriend. And so whenever I went there, she had to kind of like clear everybody out, and she'd spread out this dusty old blanket on the bamboo floor, and I'd just lie on the floor on a blanket. So pregnancy in Ecuador was really quite magical.
Right.
And so I went into labor with Alexander. I really knew I was in labor at midnight. And I woke up and I realized that our water was off. Our water was quite often not working in the house where we were living. And I remember I went into David. David was actually up turning all the lights off. And I said, my love, I think I'm in labor and we have no water, but it's okay. So I was remembering, women in Africa give birth all the time without water. Because my immediate thought was, oh no, we don't have any water. I can't do this. He's like, wait a minute. We can definitely give birth without water. And so we prepared a little bedroom that was beside the family room, like where Sophia was asleep. Sophia was asleep in the family bed. And we prepared the little bedroom beside that room for the birth. And we started boiling. We had 2 gallons of fresh water. So we did have some water. We started boiling water. We brought in a couple of blankets and some cloths. We set up some like a little beautiful toy elephant in there, cloth elephant. And we talked about calling the woman who I had wanted as a doula, and just for a minute, and I said, no, I think we're going to do this by ourselves. Are you into doing this by ourselves? And he said, yes, we can do this. And we both we really connected in that moment. And an hour and a half later, Alexander was born. It was really, really fast, really, really intense, a lot more intense than my birth with Sophia. But because I knew what was coming, it was like I was mentally prepared for it. And I felt safe. It was like, okay, I'm familiar with this, the way this feels. It doesn't feel scary. And so I was really able to just dive into it instead of, with the first birth, I really felt like I was trying to escape. It's like, get me out of here. But with Alexander's birth, I felt completely comfortable being there and actually bringing it on and bringing it deeper. And so I think that helped everything to happen as fast as it did. And I ended up feeling like I needed to go to the bathroom, and so I sat on the toilet and I was like, I think I'm pushing this baby out. And I reached up inside and I could feel his head. It was probably, a finger's length up there. Yeah. And with the next push, his head, it was the most incredible feeling to feel his head come down. It came all the way down and halfway out and then stuck there. And I was on the toilet and I was like, David, the head is frowning. He's like, is that where you want to give birth to the baby, on the toilet? And it's like, no. It's like, well, get off then. And it's like, I can't. There's a baby head coming out of me. And he's like, animals in the wild do it all the time, my love. You can get up and walk. And so I did. I got off the toilet. It was the most bizarre feeling, getting off the toilet with that little head. And got down onto the blanket. And at that moment, our daughter woke up. We could hear her waking up. And I said, please go get Sophia. She's probably a lot more like, please. So he left. I could hardly talk. It was so strong.
Right.
He left to go get Sophia. And the experience of him leaving was that it felt like hours.
Wow.
But in his recollection was that it was only seconds. Like he feels like he was probably gone for 60 seconds. But while he was gone, I had a second push that pushed Alexander's head all the way out.
Wow.
And having just like the experience of feeling his face coming out of my body is probably one of the most incredible experiences, you know, I'll ever have. And when Sophia was born, I didn't have any connection to her coming out other than, you know, just pushing her out. And Alexander I was the only one there. And so then the next push, he came totally out. And I ended up catching him and birthing him completely alone in the room. Like I was there all by myself, and it was the most intimate yet vast experience I've ever had. It was like, I don't even know if I can describe it, but it was so incredibly, purely magical and beautiful. It's just like the whole cosmos came into this moment with my son and I, this brand new being that had just emerged out of my body. And yet it felt like the entire cosmos was right there in him. So it was as if I was looking out at the universe all right here. Like just unbelievable. He was so, you know, that's that warm, soft, squishy, that new baby feeling was just unbelievable. And to be there all alone with him, and to have done it all by myself. And then a second later, David came into the room with Sophia, and, you know, looking up to see my daughter's face, the moment completely switched again, and it was like the roles reversed. So then it was like I went from looking in on the cosmos, and then all of a sudden here I was again, and the cosmos was out there, and there was my beautiful daughter. And David said, we had a baby boy. And I hadn't even looked to see what he was. It was just a baby, a person, a being, a brand new being. But there he was. We had a son. And it was I will never, ever forget that experience. And I feel so deeply grateful to have had it. Really, really deeply grateful. And something I really love to share about how it felt to have an unassisted birth is that the word is unassisted, and yet in order for me to have that birth the way that I did, I had to be the most assisted person. You know, like when we take our children out and hold their hand and show them how to cross the street, they're being assisted, and then when they can go and do it by themselves, they're still being assisted by us, but they're assisted in a way that they've reached a level of doing it by themselves. And that was really how I felt. I felt like so assisted and so supported by all of the women in my life who had also birthed their babies, not just unassisted, but any woman who had birthed her child, I felt was right there in the room with me. And, you know, the midwife that I worked with, my mom, my sister, anyone who's touched my life was right there supporting me in that moment, and to have that moment. And so I actually felt like I was the ultimately assisted, the most deeply assisted in order to have that. You know, I was so assisted I was no longer relying on other people to help me bring my child into the world.
Wow, what a powerful moment. What an amazing way for him to enter this world. Like, just you and him. Wow.
Yeah.
And he obviously was, you know, totally healthy and everything was totally fine.
Yeah. No, he was amazing. He was 8.5 pounds, 21 inches long, really strong right from the beginning. My feeling about him was that he was a man already. I was like, wow, I just birthed a man. He's like on a mission.
Wow.
He's on a mission, and he still feels that way, like incredibly strong. And the whole birth, I mean, I had the midwife that I had been working with come the next morning to check him and to check up on me. And she said he was like a bull. It's like he came out like a bull, and I said, yeah, it felt that way. Little ox.
That's funny.
Yeah, he was beautiful. No parasites. I mean, that's the other thing I just love to add is that I was able to completely get rid of all of anything that I was dealing with by natural causes, with food and just eating lots of sauerkraut and lots of sulfury foods. And yeah, that felt really, really good as well. It's not, you know, not depending on a drug to help my body release those little visitors. And he didn't have any either, which was great, because that was a huge fear for me, was that my child would get the bugs too, but he didn't. He's totally healthy, really doing really, really good, doing really well.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And have you ever done any vaccines with your children?
No.
Did they either of them do the vitamin K thing in their heel or anything like that?
No, I didn't do vitamin K with vitamin. I didn't do vitamin K with either of them. And Alexander actually never had any of, I forget what it's called, but there's that test, the blood test that they do, that I did have done for Sophia, which was just, you know, it was a little prick in the heel.
Right.
And apparently, if your first child checks out, I actually don't know if this is true, so I shouldn't say it, but this was something that somebody told me. But that if your first child is okay, your second child is as well. But I just felt so, I don't know, the whole experience with Alexander, I was so much more in touch with my faith and my trust. And I really, one of my affirmations that I was doing was that this child is wanted and desired by the entire cosmos, and I am perfectly appointed to be here to help him in. And so there was just like, I didn't feel any need. And it's interesting because I can remember feeling really urgent about telling you to do it for Araya. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah. Remember me coming over and telling you about that test?
Yeah.
And I was like, I really think you should do this. And I ended up not doing it for Alexander. It felt completely fine. I mean, it's so obvious when you have a beautiful, healthy baby right there in your arms as well. And no vaccines. I'm a strong believer in the immune system. And I also know people personally who have had some very sad stories happen after vaccines. So it's another personal choice.
What about circumcision? You had a boy. Would you circumcise? Did you?
No. It wasn't even a question.
Yeah.
No, I mean, even the WHO advises against circumcision at this point. I almost can't believe it's still happening at all. It's, you know, I would just can't imagine how I'd feel if someone took a piece of my yoni off when I was born. It feels very invasive, incredibly invasive to cut a part of a baby boy off.
Especially with like zero anesthetic or anything, just that's not good.
Yeah, and it's a very painful experience for them.
Right.
Yeah.
So how long did you guys leave the cord before you cut it?
Probably about an hour. I don't remember exactly. So everything after the birth was so sort of like gauzy in a way. Gauzy? Just so dreamy, like very unclear memories. I guess the placenta took a while to come out, and I ended up getting back on the toilet, and it came out right away at that point. And it was still attached to him at that point, and we sat with it for a while. And how did we do that? I guess it was about an hour after we tied it off. Definitely waited until the blood had stopped flowing through it.
Right.
And then we had a really nice, about a few days later, we had a really nice ceremony with just David and Sophia and Alexander and I, and we buried it there on the hill where he had been born. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Sweet. And what do other people usually say when they find out that you birthed unassisted, especially you're back there in Canada? What do people think?
Most people are really, what do people think? I feel like I get a lot of love for it.
Nice.
I feel like I get a lot of support. I'm in a very free-thinking community here on the Gulf Islands. Most women that I have in my circle of friends home birth their children if they could. I've got some very dear friends who wanted to home birth but didn't end up being able to, and that I feel is also an expression of divine life coming through, that we were able to help them come in through our hospital system. But yeah, I feel like there are people who I know who would not feel comfortable with it, and usually in that case I just don't share the story. And so the women that I've shared the story with are all really supportive and excited about it. Yeah.
Nice. Do you think if you were to ever birth again, you would choose unassisted again?
I don't know. I think, yeah, I've thought about this, and I was like, why don't I just have a huge party and I'll just invite. I've seen some really beautiful birthing videos where there were lots of people present, and it looked really, really amazing as well. And I've been at births, and I know how special it is to actually witness it. And I mean, another feeling I have is perhaps it would be really amazing to share the birth with people that I really love. I'd love to have my sister present, for example, and I know my mom would love to be there again, and even my dad would love to be at a birth, I'm sure. So I don't know. I think it would probably depend on how the pregnancy went and how I felt the person coming in felt about it as well.
Right.
Yeah, but I would feel very open to doing it unassisted again. I'd be really excited to recreate that again. And I'd also be open to having other people present.
Right. Wow, it sounds like you're open to having more.
That's another funny thing, is that not really. But we're not actively trying to stop it. And so, yeah, I'm very happy with 2, though. I feel really, really nourished by having 2, and the birth experiences that I had are really special to me. And so at this point, I feel done. I feel pretty much done. But I mean, if you're talking to me 4 years from now and I have a 3rd, I won't be surprised either.
And a little bonus question: you and your siblings, were you all home birthed as well?
I was born in the hospital.
You're the
first.
first.
That was not such a positive experience for my mom, which was probably the beginning of my relationship with home birth, was right through my own. And my mom had an experience of, the doctors wouldn't let her see her placenta. She really wanted to see her placenta, and they just threw it in the garbage, and she didn't get to see it.
Wow.
And they also took me away and put me into, what do they call it? Like, where they were watching over me 24 hours a day, because I didn't start to breathe right away. And that was against her will as well. So she felt really disrespected within the hospital, and decided to create home births after that. And so she ended up having an unassisted birth with my sister.
Wow.
Because she was born so quickly. So that was really special for me to have a mum as well. Wow. And it wasn't intended. It just happened because my sister arrived so quickly that the midwife didn't have time to arrive. And then my 2 brothers were also born at home.
Did you see any of those? Were you there?
I was in the house for them. I wasn't aware that the birth was happening for any of them except for my youngest brother. And that was a really magical experience. I wasn't right in the room, but I was definitely hearing the sounds, and I knew that a baby was coming, and I could feel the energy. And one of my clearest memories actually is of walking down the hall and into my mom's bedroom, where she was sitting on her bed like an angel. She just looked incredible. all glowing with my baby brother in her arms. So that was, that was definitely a very strong formative experience for me about the rightness of home birth. As if I was only 5 at that point. So as a 5-year-old, to be able to get out of my bed and walk down the hall, and there was my mom right there.
Wow.
It felt so, so warm and loving and safe.
Wow.
And right. It just felt like the right thing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So the other topic I wanted to ask you about, I said at the beginning, is tandem nursing.
Yay.
This thing that just blows my mind. So if anyone who doesn't know, tandem nursing is nursing more than one child at the same time. So Sophia was 3 and something?
When 3 and 3 months.
And she was still nursing. So what happened? How does that work?
I still don't really quite know. And I don't even know. Like, it feels like with a lot of the things that happened, the choices that I made, about my mothering style, didn't really even feel like choices. It felt like it was more, I was open to what my children needed. Co-sleeping was another one. It didn't really feel like a choice. It was just what happened and what was working really well and what was natural. And because I was open to it, that's what my children almost demand. It's like, what? You would put me somewhere else? No. Anyway, the tandem nursing was something that I did think about quite a lot, because I was aware what a demand nursing puts on a body. I found it, the first 3 months of Sophia's life was a huge adjustment for me. The amount of sitting and nursing, it felt like that was all I did. And it was definitely a difficult thing for me to come to terms with my first child. It seems so easy to me now, and I'm so accustomed to it that I don't even give it a second thought. But I know when she was born, I actually had a very difficult time about 3 months in, and I was just crying, and I was like, I can't do this. And I completely understood why women go to the bottle, and I was even like, I understand why women go back to work. This is so intense and so demanding. I need a break. I just can't handle it. And what ended up happening for me was actually just reformatting the way I was thinking about it. And I was like, okay, all I am is I don't have to provide the milk. I'm not nursing my baby. I'm just a channel for Mother Earth, Spirit, the universe to feed this new baby. That's all I have to be. I just have to let it flow. And as soon as I started thinking about it that way, it worked again, and it was actually a really beautiful bonding experience for me and my daughter. But it was hard that first 3 months. And so remembering that, I had a lot of hesitation about tandem nursing, and I was thinking, there's just no way. I can't, meet the needs of a newborn and a toddler, and I think I'm going to wean. I was really strongly feeling like I wanted to wean Sophia, but she had very strong opinions about it the other way. She was really not interested in weaning, and very clear about how attached she was to it still. And so I started reading about what other women's experiences had been, and I was aware that, getting a new brother or a new sibling was going to be pretty intense. I was the first child, and I feel like that was something that really affected me when I was a young baby, was getting a new sibling. And I felt like her having access to nursing still would really ease that transition, because it wouldn't be like she lost that connection to me also. And I feel like is what ended up happening. I feel like it did make the transition a lot easier for her. So she still had that relationship with me. She wasn't seeing her baby brother able to nurse, but she wasn't allowed to. That didn't happen. And so by the time he was born, she was only nursing 3 times a day, usually in the morning and right before her nap and right before bed. So she wasn't nursing all throughout the day. I had actually during my pregnancy, I had stopped producing any milk. And so she really cut down on her nursing. I wasn't making any milk at all.
Yeah.
And she was still nursing for comfort, though,
right.
and telling me she was getting milk, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure that she wasn't getting any milk. So there was very little nursing happening already. And then when he was born, probably the hardest part about the transition was actually transitioning a newborn, very loud, often baby into the family bed. Because Alexander was he was a really gassy baby, and so he required a lot of movement and a lot of bouncing. You remember? Yeah, I was always bouncing. The first 3 months of his life, I had to dance him. He was a dancer, which I think was actually really good for me, because any postpartum sort of low that I had with Sophia, I didn't have at all with Alexander. And I think a lot of that was because I was moving so much and sweating is really good for rebalancing hormones. Anyway, transitioning him into the family bed was incredibly difficult at first, because every time he woke up, Sophia would wake up, and it was just chaos, sometimes for like 5 hours in the middle of the night. No one able to sleep, so there's a serious lack of sleep. And I remember thinking, like, how does anybody do this? I mean, everyone has a different experience with their family, but my experience of the family bed at that point was like, no, why am I doing this? What am I doing?
Oh, man.
But like everything, it all worked out in the end, and we ended up bringing in white noise, and that made a world of difference. About a week into Alexander's life, we started playing the soundtrack of ocean waves on the shore, and everyone started sleeping again finally. But after waking up from pretty busy nights, though, to having to nurse both of the kids, that lasted about 2 weeks, I think. And then I started not letting her nurse in the morning, so then she was down to only 2 nursings, right before nap and then right before bed. And she continued to nap with us, which was really, really sweet, for about the first 3 or 4 months of his life. So I was still nursing them both twice a day, before nap and then right before bed. And then I think when she was about 3.5, she decided she wasn't going to nap anymore. And so that nursing went away. And then she was down to just once a day right before bed, which she's still, at this point, is still doing. And she's now 4. And she's still very attached to it. I think I wrote to you and told you that she's told me, because I've started to discuss it, because I'm feeling really ready. I'm feeling, like I'm ready for her to move on. And we discuss it, and she says, well, when I'm bigger, like as big as Dada, then I can stop. So she's giving herself a long time. But I'm waiting for that one to come in, because I know that it will. Like, I've put it out there that she's going to stop soon. And I'm just waiting for her to come online. I know that she will. She's had a nice long time. And other women that I know, other friends that I know who have, allowed their child to do child weaning, it feels like it's often around 4.5 that the children feel ready to release that. Yeah. So I wasn't, I have read stories about women who have nursed much younger toddlers and their newborn, when, the toddler is still coming up and requesting milk all through the day. That wasn't my experience. And I don't know that I would have been up for that. Who knows? I might have been, but that, I think, would have been a lot more challenging even than what I did. Because I know what I did even felt, it was a lot. It just felt like
amazing.
A lot to be producing for 2 little people.
Did you have any concerns that Sophia was getting the colostrum and he wasn't getting any, or that just seemed like it was fine?
I did, until I read that that's not a concern. And it's apparently your body just produces enough. Produces what it needs to produce. I do feel like it was probably more taxing on my body to be nursing both. And I've also heard and read since having had Alexander that the child's saliva actually provides information to your body through your glands. Have you ever heard this? About what it needs. And so if you're, again, this is something I haven't verified, but I believe it just from experience that your body responds to your child's needs. And so I think when you are nursing too, it's just like the complexity of what your body is providing. So I've had, I've felt really stable emotionally, but I have definitely felt much deeper levels of fatigue with the second baby. Just because there's less sleep and there's more nursing and 2 kids, and it feels like it's way more fun, but it's also a lot more demanding. So the rewards are higher and the requirements of me are also higher. But I would do it again. I wouldn't do it any differently. Because I feel like I can really see my daughter thriving, and that, that's what it's all about for me. I feel like she's really nourished, and I can see that she feels really safe. Right. That was why I chose to do it. It was in service to her. So beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever literally nursed them both at the same time, like one on each side?
Every nursing I've had to.
How is that? Is that just like
the times that I nurse them, like in the morning, they both wake up at the same time. Right. Again, that only lasted a couple of weeks. And laying down for a nap, my mom came to visit for the first month, and she was amazing. Yeah. It took about a month to figure it all out, and I actually needed help setting everything up for that first month. So she would come in and help me set up. It was like I was this machine that had to be like put in place and had the parts added. But my method was just lying back on a big pile of pillows. Right. And Sophia, because she was older, she always lies. They both have a side, just because that was what was easier. Yeah. She always lies on this side, and she's big enough that she can just lie on the bed. And then I prop the baby. When he was really little, he would lie right on me. Yeah. So I'd prop everything up with pillows, and then he would just lie right on top of me, which was actually how he slept for the first 3 months of his life. He just wouldn't sleep off of my body, which was also very tiring, like having a baby on me all the time. But again, he's thriving. He's big.
I bet he is.
Yeah, and then about after a month, I got to the point where Alexander was big enough and not quite so floppy anymore, and I could set myself up. Actually do it by myself. And I remember that day I was like, I don't need help like lying down and putting my babies to sleep anymore. Wow. It was so liberating. So now I lie back on the pillows, and Alexander is on one side resting on a pillow still, because he's still little enough, and Sophia's on the other side. And she's now at the point where I actually feel my body starts saying no pretty quickly to her. So it's usually only like a minute that she gets to nurse. And she's now in her own bed as of about 2 months ago, which is right beside my bed. So she finishes nursing and then moves into her own bed, which is also an incredible step. It's like all of these amazing things that I never, because she was such a snuggly little girl. I mean, when she was little, she wouldn't sleep without having part of her touching me. Right. And now she's in her own bed.
Wow.
So I feel like for her, it's a really important way for her to end the day and just reground and reconnect with Mama. And she also, I feel the bond between my 2 children is a lot stronger because they're nurslings together. Right. Like they've shared that experience of nursing and gazing at each other across the expanse of Mama. Yeah, they're like co-nurslings. So I think that's really increased their friendship as well. Mm.
Wow, beautiful, thank you. That satisfied my tandem nursing curiosity.
Yeah, I think that, I feel like it would probably happen really differently for everyone.
Yeah.
Depending on the age of the toddler that was tandem nursing and the needs of the toddler.
Right.
I've read very different accounts of what tandem nursing was for different mums. depending on the kids. But,
Yeah.
you know, the story is almost always the feeling of that it really eased the transition for the older sibling and allowed them a lot more sense of, you know, self-empowerment than otherwise. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is there anywhere that people can find you online if they want to learn more about you?
Not really right now. I mean, we've got our juice feasting site, but that's not really anything about mothering or
Right.
babies right now.
But juicefeasting.com.
Yeah, and I do have a really old blog that has, you know, Sophia's birth story on it and sort of the way that I ate during her pregnancy, which is, what is it? I think it's Beautiful Baby Rain at wordpress.com.
Right.
Is that what it is? I think that's what it is.
Sounds right.
But yeah, that's really old. I haven't updated that in years now. It's been years and years. Yeah.
Cool. So the main place would be juicefeasting.com.
Yeah.
Or like what you guys get up to.
Yeah. Yes. And it's actually due for a major overhaul, hopefully coming online within the next few weeks. It's what the papa of the family has been very busy working on. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Katrina, for coming and sharing today your experience and your wonderful stories. And Katrina was actually her and her mum were the main ones who helped Dora and I to nurse because we were having lots of issues. So you guys have, you know, a really strong place in my heart, and you always will.
Aw, thank you. Well, you too. That was an incredible honor to be able to do that. Again, it felt like one of the main reasons that I nursed. It's like, so I can show Angela. No, it is. It's an incredible gift to be able to share. So thank you. I was really, you know, it was an incredible gift for me to have you be so open and let us come in and share. Mm-hmm. So it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to ask all those questions and to learn, especially when when our naked bodies are involved.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so I feel a lot of really deep respect and compassion and love for all the mamas in all manifestations of what their births have taken and their mothering. And yeah, it's a very challenging role. Very, very rewarding, but also, it demands a lot. Mm-hmm. I've got a lot of love for all of you.
All right. Thank you so much again for coming and sharing. And thank you everyone for watching. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.